This week will be the continuation of last session where we automated the Lambda to turn on and off the EC2 instance. But this time we are going to see about how to get notified if there is any change happened in our infra, where we can do a security audit, automated part, and how can we react immediately if there is any security breach happening using the service called AWS Config. Before seeing like how it is done, let's see a quick demo. So what I'm going to do is I already created a instance. It's currently in the stop state. So let's get it start the instance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to the security of the instance. And so we have the security group here for the instance is mapped. If you're someone hearing security group for the first time, it's where like what ports are allowed to the instance. We configure that, like who can access ports like 80, 443 and stuff. So what we're going to do is let's wait for the instance to come to start state. So it's initializing is in running state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the inbound rule for the security group of the instance. Let's say I'm going to delete it for example. So once I made change to the security group, what going to happen is in few seconds we should see the state of the instance will start from running into the stop state, and we will go deep into it, like what's the configuration made, how it's working, component by component. You see it's turned from running into stop state. So we touched the security group and then it detected the change, something happened to the security group, and then it went ahead and turned off the instance state. So in the concept we call it as event driven architecture, which is something an event happened and then that event is triggering the another action. As an end result you get the expected result or the configuration. So this can be used in multiple scenarios. The scenario which we are talking here is about security scenario. You can also use it for automating your server on and off, or the use case can be like infinity based on use case. So let's talk like what we trying to do here for our requirement. So we have the EC2 instance and we want to protect our EC2 instance, saying that the security group that is mapped to the EC2 instance, it should be always protected, and we don't want any rules ports gets wide open by chance. And if that happens, we want to quickly react and update the security group to the pre-state. But for the demo purpose, what we did is like if any changes happen to security group, we are turning off or on. So just the API call would change or the program you would add would change. So how this action is done to either turn on or off, we use this Lambda, and the Lambda code which we discussed in the previous session. And this Lambda is getting notified via SNS that some change happened. And how the SNS get notified or how the SNS get triggered, it's based on the AWS config. So we'll start from right to left, how this entire action performs. So to begin with, we will go and visit the service called AWS config. So AWS config as a service can be used for multiple purpose. What we are seeing today is for one specific use case, but you can see like what are all the resources available in your AWS account, like how many EC2 instances running, how many S3 buckets are there, how many ACM certificates are there. So all those details you can fetch it in the AWS config. It would contains all of your resources, and you can also monitor any config change. So let's say I want to get notified when there is a specific change happens to a specific instance, then I can add a specific monitoring rule to continuously monitor. In our case, as you see, like whenever we monitor a security group, it get immediately recognized in a few seconds, and then we set up an action item to react for it. So that we can do it. You can also set up rules to see like if this specific compilant occurs and what should be done. So as you see in the screen, the rules wise you have like AWS managed rules. So AWS have a predefined rules which they consider as a common compilant issue. So you can onboard those rules. So if any compilant happened in your account or for any of your resources, then you get notified or you can act on it. Or you have a specific use case, let's say this specific instance, if any compiler happened, then I need to get notified, which is not defined by AWS, then you can write a custom Lambda rule to say that execute this specific Lambda for every 1 hour or like every day, and then you can provide details, or you can also add like when configuration changes happen. So you trigger a Lambda whenever there is a configuration changes happens for a specific resource, or overall even periodic, you can go like every 1 day or every 3 hours, 1 hour, you can go to the granular level to get notified. So you can trigger a custom notify whenever the security group happens, and whenever there is change, configuration change happens, you can get notified and you can react. To simplify it further, you also have monitoring rules. So let's say I don't want to react or anything, but if any production changes get deployed, as an application owner, I want to get notified there is some production changes happening. So then you can set up a continuous monitoring rule for your accounts resource type, and then you can get notified like what happens. So in our case, what we did is we are recording a resource type of the S3 bucket and also the security group. And if you see where we are getting it delivered, so we are getting delivered to a specific SNS topic. So SNS topic, you can use SNS topic either to deliver the message over email, Slack. You can also use SNS to get delivered over the phone call, like PagerDuty if you're using, or other third-party applications to get notify your on-call person. If any metric is used, then you can use SNS. You can also use SNS to trigger the Lambda. So it depends upon the use case, like what you're going. In our case, what we did is whenever there is any changes happen to security group or the S3 bucket, then we map it to an SNS topic called notify SG. And if I go to the SNS topic itself, I will show you like how we integrate the Lambda automation which we did. So if we go to the topics, so we already created a SNS topic notify from SG, and what we did is we created a subscription for the Lambda. So this Lambda is something like we saw in the previous session, like which would turn on or off the EC2 instance. So for now I mapped the Lambda code that would stop the instance, not on the instance. So how we linked it, so it's straightforward. You create a subscription, and the topic here, and you have it. The protocol, you choose AWS Lambda, since we want to trigger a Lambda. In case if you want to send an email or SMS, you can choose respectively, but in our case we want to trigger a Lambda, and then you can choose the Lambda endpoint, and you can create a subscription which would get notified whenever there is a message being pushed to the specific topic, and then the Lambda would get triggered. If you go for the Lambda part itself, if you see the SNS, let's revisit the Lambda name. It's got subscribe. The Lambda name we are using is the stop-EC2. We are observing all the changes it's done for the security group, and then we move to the SNS. So any changes happen to the security group, it notifies SNS. Then for SNS, we subscribe the Lambda. So that is going to trigger the Lambda. And if we go for the Lambda service, you can see this is the Lambda service we used, which is stop-EC2. And since we subscribed, you can also see the trigger being added as the SNS. It's the same. Either you can come to the Lambda and subscribe for the SNS by adding the trigger, or you can go to the UI of the SNS topic and then create subscription to the specific Lambda. So both way will work. So then here we have the code, which is to do the stop instance command, and we provided the instance ID of the instance which you want to turn it off. And if you see, the instance ID is same as what we have in place. So now let's say I want to start the instance. For now, let it start. And so this Lambda gets triggered whenever there's a change in the security group, and then it's going to trigger the Lambda, and this Lambda would go and switch off the EC2 instance. So for monitoring purpose, you can do that. If you have a strict rule that you don't want to react manually, because a few things are like well known, like you should not open port SSH for all the users. It should be a specific one. So there are like predefined company policy you will be having based on the sensitivity of the application. So you can work on granular level of your use case, and you get more observe the, in our case we are straightforward blocking it, right, or like stopping the instance, whereas you can also go deeper level, like if there's any change in security group, see what change has been done, and then you can write some custom rules within the Lambda custom code to check is there anything violating your policy, and you can add a immediate response action. Let's say if a port is open for all, you want to close it off. Rather than stopping the instance, you can use an update API call to update the security group, so that you don't want your engineers to wake up for on call and then do the work, whereas it's automatically secured and protected at any point of time, even if a junior is doing some manual error by mistake. So you can streamline it in a well board. Also, you can try using the predefined compliance policy which the AWS offers on their own per service wise, so that you can ensure that the common policies have been followed, like the bucket should not be open to public. So those kind of things they offer. The one thing is, by default, the config is region specific, right? So if I'm onboarding on North Virginia, you generally get listed of North Virginia. You can also provide the authorizations saying that, okay, this specific ID and this is the region, I need to observe it. So on scenarios like where you have the organization unit structure, like multiple accounts, and you want to do the compliance for all the accounts, rather creating the AWS config for each and every account, each and every region, you can provide the authorization to a specific account and the specific region, and then you can provide your compliant rules to get modified. And whatever you have seen in prior sessions, right, like cross-role account access, everything will come into picture there. Even right from control tower, like you said, the OU, and then cross account permission for the role access for your Lambda to evaluate and then update your security process. So everything come into picture. So that's mostly for today's part, like where we saw about how we can use config to monitor any custom change, and then how to subscribe or get notified to the SNS, and then how we can use Lambda to trigger it. So this SNS to Lambda trigger itself can be used in multiple scenarios. Here we talked the AWS config. You can also use the CloudWatch metric whenever there's an alarm is happening. Let's say you have an EC2 instance and the CloudWatch EC2 instance metrics CPU, let's say, spiking for 90%, and you might be having a requirement like whenever there is a spiking, then just restart it. If that is a resolution for your application, rather getting notified an engineer to wake up and restart it each time something happens, you can get the metric or alarm configured, get it notified to the SNS topic, and then let the SNS to trigger the Lambda and then do the restart action for EC2. So this specific portion, SNS to Lambda, itself can be used in a number of scenarios based on the service what you use, based on what automation you want to involve, and this will act as a core fundamental for the event trigger architectural part. An event is happening, so in this case, the event of 90% above CPU happened. In our previous state, an event of a change of security group happened. So for an event trigger architecture, this can come act as a base, and following all the best practices, we can avoid all the manual effort with ease. Okay, so any specific doubts, any queries so far?